Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you. Right, we're going to talk today about simplification before digitisation or digitalisation, depending on how you, whichever one you fancy. We've got some great panellists. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves, and we'll do some questions, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. Okay, so Alison, do you want to go first?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Anna. So I'm Alison Court. I'm Chief Transformation Officer for Oxfam. I'm sure many of you know, but we're operational in about 32 countries, including Ukraine and Gaza, and we do humanitarian crisis response. So when something happens, a disaster happens, like pipes and water and sanitation and health is what we're known for. And then we do campaigning and advocacy, trying to change policy within the UK and UK government to improve the lives of some of the most vulnerable communities on the planet. So that's me.
Thank you, Andrew.
My name's Andrew McLennan. I work at an asset manager called Naveen. We have a $1.1 trillion under management. And so I run technology globally for the private assets. So we invest in private equity, so we buy companies, private credit and real estate. We have about $200 billion in private assets. We're the largest owner of vineyards in the world, for example, but we own a lot of natural capital, so farmland, timberland, and so we use technology across the whole investment life cycle to collect data from our investment properties, to do reporting, analytics, make better investments, and of course sustainability and ESG is critical in what we do.
Okay, Carolyn?
My name's Carolyn Kerwin. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Group Systems at Hiscox. We are an insurer. We do everything from retail, like house insurance, to big ticket, insuring fine art and things like rockets. We operate in the UK, in London Market, and in Europe and the United States.
Super. Thank you very much. So hopefully we'll get some of that diversity of organisation conversation out. So as I was introduced, Anna Barsby, I'm former CIO at Halfords, Morrisons, Asda, as well as Triple Eight William Hill. Now founded my own consultancy. So just so you know where I'm at. Right, so simplification for digitisation. We're going to start talking about more the cultural side. And first question is, how can businesses integrate that digitisation while staying true to their core values? And I think that's going to be a really interesting one to hear from very different organisations. So, Alison, can I start with you at Oxfam? Because that must be pretty topical for you.
Sure, it is. So, I mean, first of all, I think your organisation needs to have a very clear view of what its values are. And I think that's not just what's written on the kind of corporate blurb, but also, kind of living and breathing within the organisation. So for Oxfam, one of the central kind of structures that we have that helps us kind of define and refine the values, particularly when it comes to digital strategy, is we have a global ethics committee, but that ethics committee is not chaired by senior leadership. So I, as a senior leader, had to go with my digital data and technology strategy to the Global Ethics Committee, and it's chaired by an incredible young leader, but very experienced in ethics. That's her background, etc. And so I think, and so I had to demonstrate to that group of that represent the organisation from top to bottom, how we had embedded the values of Oxfam around transparency, particularly the use of data. So we have really clear policies about beneficiary data, as you can imagine, because it's a tool by which some authoritarian governments might use to target particularly populations. And we're apolitical, but ultimately, we're here to help protect people in the most difficult circumstances. So I think it's really important that you have them defined and it's kind of bedded into the way that the organisation works. So, I mean, that's just one example of how we run it at Oxfam. But like I said, I think for us, it lives and breathes. I had a lot of notes from the ethics committee about, how we needed to refine particularly our use of data, etc. And actually we had to do a bit more policy work, particularly with some of the implementation of AI and some of the tools that we're using. So I think you have to live and breathe it, and it will be different in Oxfam than it will in other organisations, but nonetheless. And I think without that, you don't really have a strong North Star in the organisation. And so then, it can take, lots of different implications and impacts that maybe you don't anticipate as a technology leader.
And just thinking about those international borders, how does that work with particularly storage of data or use of data generally?
So we use European data standards and GDPR for across all of our operations,
Okay.
regardless of where they are in the world. So yes, we could, get away with in some of the places that we're working, we could be more, I'd say, lax about the way that we're storing and using data. But that's the standard we hold ourselves to, regardless of where we're working.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Andrew. Let's come to you. The same question. How does digitalisation fit with values?
Well, it's key. So we're the asset manager, but we're owned by a non-profit in the US. So our parent company looks after the pensions of all the public sector workers in the US. So if you're a nurse or a firefighter, your pension contributions get given to us, and we manage it on your behalf, and we give it back. So of course, our ethos across what we do in investments is around doing good investments for people who do good in society, and so that infuses throughout the whole organisation. So when we make investments into kind of natural capital or real estate, it isn't just to maximise returns. That's one, of course, idea, but it's maximising returns with regards to the social good, social impact, environmental good of what we do. And so when you turn that back into data, well, you've got to focus on what is the question we're trying to solve. And we're trying to be product-led, so our customers are the participants, the people who do good in society, and we're trying to give them a return and a lifetime income. And we do that through collection of data, not necessarily on the individual investors, but on our assets. So when you think about sustainability, for example, we want to look at our buildings. Are they green? Are they ESG compliant? And so you've got to collect a lot of data from all of our assets to make sure that we understand, can this asset meet the sustainability goals of the countries, of our organization? Can we get to net zero carbon by a certain date? And you can only really do that by doing data-driven analysis. So we collect a lot of different data from all of our investments. We bring that in, and once the data is in our systems, we can then really focus on the three kind of questions. It's are we meeting regulatory duties? Are we meeting investor inquiries? But the real important one as well is can we use that data to make better investment decisions, either to identify investment opportunities, but also really to focus on, can we put capex into our buildings to turn them into more green investments? So putting in double glazing, putting in energy efficient light bulbs. On our crops, can we plant different types of crops? Can we plant more trees? But you can only really make those asset management decisions about our investments if you have the data. And when you think about how much investments we have $200 billion across real estate, for example. That's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of investments, and it's just a lot of data. So we need to collect that data, have good governance of our data, so that we can entrust it to do analysis on top of that data.
So just a quick follow-up on that then. How has digital really improved your management of data in that situation?
Two sides. One is, so without the digitization, again, there's an old quote I like, without data, you're just a person with an opinion. And that's the idea. So we have to collect the data, have to digitize the data. And there's two sides. One is, do we send people out to count trees? Or do we go and take satellite photos and use that? Do we use drones? How do we move the story forward and away from how people did asset management 50, 20, 30 years ago to what we're doing now? How can we leverage data, and how can we digitize the whole investment process to collect that data to then make the investment decisions and analysis?
No, interesting. Some brilliant examples. So Carolyn, let's come to Hiscox. The original question around digitization and core values.
Yeah, core values are really, really important for Hiscox. Our values and our brand, as Alison was saying, they are the heart of everything that we do. And we've got 5 core values, but 2 of them I think are really, really important in driving our digital strategy at the moment. The first one is courage, so being willing to take that risk to improve things and make them better. but the other one is human. And this is about being fair and inclusive. And one thing that we are really proud of in our brand is we try to have the human aspect of it, and really care about our customers and what their individual needs are. So when we look at whether it's digital layers for our retail products, or any other type of technologies, using AI and data analytics, it's, well, what's the human aspect of that? So we want to be using technology as a competitive advantage in our organization, but because human is such a core value to us, we have to make sure that we're maintaining the human aspect of it. So in an insurer, obviously underwriting is an incredibly important process in our business. So we've been adopting technologies, digital technologies, AI technologies, to augment our underwriting process. So it's not about eliminating teams or eliminating the human aspect of it. It's actually about augmenting that. So if we can automate things and using data and using AI analytics to make the analytics and part of that process a lot shorter, it means that our team members then can be much more human with our customers and getting to know you as an individual. What do you need? So we're actually using technology as a way to be even more human and to promote our values even more out to our customers.
That's interesting. We'll stay with you, Carolyn, and just move it slightly. When you're implementing those sorts of digitalization, the digital projects, digital steps, how do you foster a culture of change within the organisation, within your own teams?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we as technology leaders can get really excited about the change. There's a new tech, we want to roll this out. We've got big goals from our senior executives and we need to achieve them. But the only way to do that is to bring our teams along that journey with us. And so many times when we talk about digital transformations, we start from the current operating model to the target operating model, right? So we're starting at A and we want to go to B, but it's not really enough to bring people along to change the mindset. So we need to go beyond just the A and the B and take it to the next step. Because a lot of times when people hear about change, a digital transformation, we're going on this journey, we want to continually improve, they think, well, then everything's going to change. But it's not. And we can talk about, well, what's going to remain the same. So we really want to only change maybe 25, 30% of what we're doing today. And maybe that's in our tech stack, or maybe that's in our processes. But making sure that they understand going from A to B really only includes a small portion of that. And there's so much of what they do today is still really valuable and relevant to the company. But then being really clear, okay, these pieces over here, we need to change them. And what does that look like? What are those steps we're going to take, and how can you participate in that? And then the last two pieces for me and my learnings of all the digital transformations I've done over the years is being really clear on the risks. So what happens if we don't make these changes? What happens if we don't digitalize? What happens if we don't adopt more modern technologies? What's the risk to us as a company, to the market, to our customers? Being able to articulate that. And then the last piece is we're all humans. We care about why do we benefit from this. So it's the what's in it for me kind of conversation part. We need to be able to tell our team members why this is a good thing for them. So it's not just mitigating a risk to the company or our customers, but how are they going to benefit? And as technologies, I was talking with some people last night at the dinner about we're techies. We like to play with new toys and do cool things. And going on these digital transformation journeys gives our team members opportunities to grow and develop and to do new things. So we need to be really, really clear on how this benefits them as an individual, not just the company.
That's great. And Andrew, let's come to you on that same topic. How do you bring the people, your colleagues and customers along that journey?
Well, there's two sides, I'd say. One end of the bookend is educating people, especially with ML and AI and how fast that's coming through compared to other technology advancements. We can't just ignore it anymore. It's always to say that when you look at the personal computer before and after, when you look at the internet before and after, the mobile phone before and after, there'll be a time very soon when you won't remember time before AI. And the difference with AI compared to everything else is the time frame. The personal computer took many years, if not a decade or longer, before it really transformed the world. Whereas AI is happening like real time now. And so we have to educate our employees about the benefits of this. And that has to start from the top of the way down. A lot of people coming out of university now already know a lot of things, but when you look to the C-suite, the people who actually make the investment decisions and the direction of where we're going to go, because people are busy with their day-to-day life, busy with running an organization, they don't always take the time to step back and actually stay on top of what's happening. But it's critical that it's led from the top. So the culture really has to be driven from the C-suite. Because if they're bought in and they're educated, then that infuses the whole organisation, I'd say. So that's one aspect, and then the other aspect is you've got to try. You can't just wait and see what happens. You've just got to get involved. Again, you don't need to throw the kitchen sink at it, but you need to try proof of concepts, but with an idea that the proof of concept will add to the education internally. And so everything you do is really to kind of build knowledge, build expertise, but you don't want to just invest everything in one thing because it's moving so fast. You don't know where it will be in the future. But tie all of it back to like, what is the purpose of what we're doing? It's to give our participants a lifetime income after they retire. And so if we can use data and analytics to either reduce our costs, that puts more money back into the pockets of our retired clients. Same way if we can identify better investments or do better management of kind of our net zero carbon usage, that puts less strain on the society and on the world. So it's really focusing what's the purpose of your organization, and working back from the purpose through to how can you use technology and digitalization to really drive that in this ever-changing world.
That's interesting. Do you follow-up question for you? Do you use sort of separate change management capabilities, or is it embedded in your teams? How does that work?
We have both. It depends. So a lot of times when you do digital transformations or so forth, they usually fail. And why do they fail? Is because it's only usually 10 to 20% of the change is technology change. A lot of it is culture and people change. How do you get the non-technologists to buy into doing things differently? Especially if you're in an organization that has kind of done certain things the same way. A lot of people are kind of scared about what will happen for them. But as you can probably think back, when you were young, what you were doing when you were a junior in your organization, those functions you did then are very different to the functions your juniors do nowadays. The job hasn't gone, but the things you do in your job has gone. And so people need to more embrace the change. That change is coming, and it's up to the individual, but it's also up to the organisation and society to help bring people along this journey.
Okay, thank you. And Alison, tell us about Oxfam and how it all works there with, I mean, you won't call them customers, but you affect a lot of people externally as well as internally, and how you manage that.
I mean, I think a lot of it's been said by Carolyn and Andrew, but I mean, I think that technology teams and leaders have probably the most important job in the organisation. And I'm not just saying that as a technology leader. I think it's increasingly the case that the responsibility is on us. So I took over the technology teams in Oxfam about 3 years ago, and we were really far away from the organisation. I would say kind of proudly so, because of our expertise. And I think the last 3 years, what we've really focused on is the addressing the kind of resistance with our stakeholders. So, you know, some of my stakeholders are, you know, they're in Yemen or wherever, and they're getting shot at. So making them care about, you know, some of the things that we care about, you know, no question it's challenging. But I also think that technology teams and leaders have not done themselves a lot of favours in the past by being too kind of arrogant about their expertise. And so we've got a programme running at the moment which is about our digitising our fundraising, and like met a huge amount of resistance from some of the fundraising teams, not because but just because we hadn't really articulated the change or talked about it very well in kind of simple human language that non-technology teams could understand. So I really feel it's addressing that resistance, like being clear it's your responsibility then to translate that for a non-technical audience, being really clear and simple about the language that you use, and then, like Andrew said, you know, taking quite like a span of bets and being clear not all of them are going to pay off, or not all of them are going to be useful, but we're going to learn in that process. And then as a senior leader in an organisation that's always resource constrained, my role has been creating the air cover and resources to do some of that experimentation, and then also being clear with, like you said, at C-suite and at board, some of my stakeholders aren't technologists, and so again, like reiterating, articulating what's the use case or what's the business case for that work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but incredibly tricky, particularly in your environment, I imagine. Let's move on to more of the tech stack, and how do you assess your tech stacks and what you've already got for opportunities, digitalisation, AI, whatever it is, for innovation for the next step? So Caroline, should we come to you first on that?
Sure. It's a timely question. We, as a new technology leadership team at Hiscox, as a few of us who only joined in the last few months, we've been developing our tech strategy, and we follow PPT, people, process, technology, as I'm sure many of you have used in your own journeys. But from the architecture perspective, the tech stack, typical organization, we've got legacy systems. We've got these massive cores that do anything and everything, policy administrations and claims and pricing engines and anything that you can think of in insurance. And what that doesn't allow us to do is to be really flexible. So as we were looking at our tech stack, from monolith to system of records, where do we want to be on that spectrum, right? So we're really looking into composable architecture. Where can we be much more reusable, and where do we have flexibility? So we have 2 big ticket markets, and then we've got 3 retail markets, and they have very different needs, very different types of products. But that doesn't mean that there aren't technologies that we can leverage across all of those markets. So our digital layer, for example, is something that we can actually be managing from the center of our organization and customize that out at the edges and be much more bespoke as we need to, and be more flexible to the different market conditions, whether that be retail, big ticket, US, EU. So we're really looking at our tech stacks from breaking up that monolith, being much more composable. Where can we reuse technologies? And then where does it make a difference to have the competitive advantage? And as we've talked about with the learnings, it gives our teams opportunities as well to move throughout the organization, or to share their proofs of concepts and the outcomes of that with the other business units that we have. So we're looking at it from breaking up the monolith. Where can we share knowledge? Where can we share experience? And especially from a digital layer, our customers want to be much more flexible with the way that they interact with us. So they want mobile apps. They want it to be push of a button. And so we need to be making sure that we have an architecture stack that is flexible to accommodate that.
Yeah, all makes a lot of sense, for a lot of hard work, and how you, every business case clearly stands up against something that's customer facing, or particularly when it comes to the back end. But we all know that, we've all been there. Alison, do you want to take that one too?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so the kind of ongoing inventory of our infrastructure, so that process was not a process that we were, we got, so 3 years ago we weren't running that kind of regular assessment, and we didn't really have a roadmap for our infrastructure. So for me, lots and lots of opportunities I came in to kind of do that assessment. And I think, like Carolyn said, actually we found opportunities where we had existing technology that had capability that we could extend, particularly across for our retail infrastructure. So we have about 600 high street shops. We're actually, part of our organisation is a retail business. So we found lots of opportunity there, and we found other opportunities. So, for example, globally at one point we were buying, I think, pretty much every ERP system that there was on the market. Just organically, people had gone off and thought they needed X, Y, and Z, and so it's still we're still doing a lot of the development around our ERP, but like a real opportunity to bring that together, consolidate it. We're just about to change our HR system globally, so great opportunities, but without that kind of, I think, regular conversation about inventory, and for us, the conversation about our infrastructure roadmap that is, it's a distinct thing. We wouldn't have leveraged those opportunities, understood them globally across the areas that we work in. So we have regional platforms in Africa, Asia, etc., and IT leaders in those. So we brought everybody together to do that assessment together, and now they're all kind of bought into the roadmap, and we look at it every quarter and assess where we are. So it's that kind of, I think, process for us that's been incredibly good at understanding where the opportunities are, and then that coming from the teams themselves. So then you don't have to do the kind of buying around the implementation of it, because they're already on the same page as you.
And what's been the trickiest bit of putting that process in? Because we all struggle with the pipeline and how we choose what projects we're going to do as businesses.
I mean, like Carolyn said, it's I think it was you said, it's a prioritisation between, for us, between revenue projects and then the projects and programmes that we know are going to make the biggest impact in people working in the organisation and the employee experience that they have with us, which 3 years ago was pretty shocking, and now is improving. So it's making those prioritisation decisions. But again, we've got a way that we do that now, and it's not just the C-suite that does that. We sit with the technology leaders, and we have that conversation together. But it's making those prioritisation and trade-offs between improving the experience for countries and regions where we're delivering work, and then our revenue.
Yeah, that was a tricky bit. Andrew, you want to talk us through your story?
Yeah, so the way we think about technology is the same way that the investing folk think about doing investments and deals. So it's a return on investment, because in our seats, we like technology. We want to implement technology and to infuse it into everything we do. But you have to bear in mind that there's always that old adage, technologists will always spend 2 months automating something that can take a single person 5 minutes to do them manually. And so we've got to be careful that we don't just spend so much money using technologists to digitize things that don't really need digitizing. And that's the scale, because every dollar we spend is a dollar that doesn't go back to an individual in their retirement. And so we have to focus on the return on investment. When you think about the return on investment, though, there's the denominator, the cost of implementing, aka the people. But when you think about the numerator, it isn't purely always just the revenue you're going to increase. It's also when you've got to think about the risks you're mitigating. So when you think about the timeline of what you're doing, it's really a 3, 5, or 7 year investment process in technology to do these things, and so there's a cost of not doing technology, whether it's cyber and or technical debt. Or there's many different ways to think about the baked-in cost or benefit of an investment in technology. So you've got to consider that whole end-to-end life cycle, and so that's how we think of like a return on investment of our things. But when you think about the technology we have, I mentioned back, it's you don't want to automate things that are very kind of quick to do necessarily. But it always comes at a scale. So if you have one building, and it's like you personally, you can do things in Excel manually or even in your head. But if you're an investor and you've got 10 buildings, well, it becomes hard to do it in your head. So you need some technology, maybe Excel. When you've got 100 buildings, well, maybe Excel stops working. If you've got 1,000, and so it's a scale question. And so when you go from 1 billion to 10 billion to 100 billion and beyond, the problems you have at different scales start showing themselves. And so that helps give you an idea of where you should spend your investments. You need to know where your company's going. Where will you be in 3 years' time? Are you going to do bigger investments? Are you going to acquire competitors? And use that to define your roadmap. Because the way we increase our assets under management is both organically, but it's all through acquisition. So we do M&A, we'll buy another asset manager, we'll integrate them, and they'll have a tech stack for their organization that worked for their size, usually. But when you look at them, they might have XYZ systems. They may be using Azure or Google. We're using potentially like AWS or something else. And so the question is, do you leave these companies we've acquired standalone, or do you integrate them? And if you're integrating them, where do you integrate them? Do you just infuse take all their assets and put it to your platform? Or have they got better things in their application? So it's really reevaluating where do you want to be, learning from the people you acquire, learning from your peer set who are doing things differently, and taking you on this journey. And it's a question about where do you want to be, how much you want to invest in it, what's the return, and tying it all together. And if you do the cloud journey, don't do the cloud journey in the same mindset as if you had done it on-prem, because a lot of people do that cloud journey implementing things on cloud as if it was on-prem, and they don't really reap the benefits. It's a whole different mindset. So when you implement new technology, you've got to change your mindset to make them best use of that technology, rather than just brute forcing it in the way you've done it before.
Fab. I think we've got time for one more question. So I'm going to bring us back to the topic, simplification before digitalisation. Can you each give me an example of where you have had to simplify something before you've brought in a technology solution or a digital solution? Alison, do you have something top of mind?
Yeah, so so I kind of see the simplification as part of the transformation journey. I don't think it can be kind of separate, because you've got to know what you're simplifying for. But so I talked about the kind of ERP, the fact that we were buying pretty much every system, and but partly that was also because we had different process and policy running in different parts of the world, and so what we had to do alongside, and so that's what I mean. It's part of the transformation roadmap, but what we had to do alongside the kind of requirements gathering, etc., for is look at our policy and processes across those regions. Now, so for HR, there are some, there's 20, it's the 80-20 rule. There's 20% that has to be contextualised because of local labour law, but there's 80% that actually is pretty much the same. So everybody had made their case, came and made their case for why they were special, but actually when we looked at it, there was quite a lot of there's quite a lot of overlap. And so getting the HR teams to kind of see that, realise it, see it together, and then start to do the work to simplify their processes, to put in place more standardised policy. We just hadn't done it before. And so it definitely, I mean, I hate that word, but it's definitely been a journey for the teams that are doing that work. But our primary aim was, and we gave the team this challenge, which is how much simplification can you do? We want you to demonstrate what efficiencies you're going to do, like how many steps have you taken out of your recruitment processes. So they started to sit, and like we ran a bit of a scoreboard, they started to see it as like a bit of a kind of game. So they were energised by that kind of challenge from us. And yeah, I mean, we're still in the middle of some of the implementation of the ERP, of the technology, but the teams have already come so far in harmonising policy and process, and I think that's the kind of challenge really. But it has to be part of the transformation journey, which is why the technology leaders and that roadmap can be such an engine for change in the organisation.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Andrew, do you want to give us an example?
Yeah, so we always have to be careful. It's a people question, really. And in an organisation, you really ideally want to break down silos, because if you have silos, have separate departments who don't really communicate, and then you have technology teams working with each individual department independently, they can end up building independent tech stacks, of course. But then, so we need to try and break down those silos. So first, we need to figure out across the technology, should technology be a horizontal to answer more holistic questions, or should we be department-based and have more speciality? But the same question goes to the organisation as well. Is there a CFO, a COO above it all who has to answer questions across the whole organisation? And if there is, then that really shapes the direction of where you would take your technology. So the simplification comes down to kind of organisational simplification in terms of who is your stakeholder? How are you going to break down those silos? And that's just on the business side. When you think about technology, though, it's also, when you want to simplify, sometimes it's a segregation of duties actually important. So you have IT specialists, you have developers. We've actually added in product managers as well, who aren't necessarily writing the code, but who are working hand in glove to define the roadmap. And so it's trying to figure out the right people in the right seats to come up with the benefits, so to make sure you're focusing on the right return on investment. So the technologists who like doing technology and are good at it should be focusing on the technology. people who like coming up with roadmaps and doing kind of the ideation and quantification of the benefits should be doing that. So it's trying to put the organization in the organization, put the structure in the organization, but also putting the structure into your technology teams to make sure that the right people in the right seats and you're answering the right questions holistically to avoid duplication and provide the best benefit to your firm and your customers.
Great, thank you. And Carolyn, finally, simplification.
Yeah, so my example, we were rolling out a new ITSM tool, and it's very much related to the points that Alison and Andrew were just making about working cross-functionally. So we use the PPT model because it does start with people and process first. The tech piece is the easy bit. I think you mentioned that before, Andrew. And as we were rolling that out, I've seen it so many times in digital transformations that you only look at that technology from the perspective of the one team that you think is the core team that's using it. But there's always other teams and other users of that technology. So you can't really simplify the process if you're not thinking holistically of all of the users. So with this ITSM rollout, we had cross-functional user groups. So we had people from every single function to understand not just the process from the tech side of it, but all of those different user groups to say, well, what does that process really look like for everyone? And then we could simplify it. Because what you don't want to do is automate a clunky process. Like you said, you don't want to just take on-prem into the cloud. You also don't want to take a suboptimal process and simply automate that. And really the only way to understand what that process is by thinking cross-functionally and across the whole organization. And how are your customers using that internally and externally? So by having these cross-functional user groups, we were able to identify all of the processes, exactly where to simplify them. So we spent a year, developing all of those requirements, and then the development piece of that was probably only about 4 months, and we went live, and we only had a couple of bumps in the road. So it's really worth the investment to understand all of those user groups and where you can simplify before you even touch the tech piece of it.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, panel. We've got time for 1 or 2 questions. If anyone would like to hear more about these fascinating industries. Yes, please.
In terms of the overall transformation and the work you have, obviously you have a big roadmap to do, but then you still have to innovate, you have to be up in the market. So how do you experiment and be up to date in the market actually when you are having a big roadmap and big things to do?
Did everyone hear that? Do you want me to repeat it? How do you keep up to date while you're experimenting on your roadmap? Yeah. Do you want to direct that to anyone, or should we open it up? Okay, anyone?
I mean, we're lucky enough at Hiscox to have a team that's really focused on experimentation and innovation and R&D. We don't want that to be solely that one team. We want to give opportunities to all of our team members to participate in that. So with our enterprise architecture team, they're really focused on, what's the latest in the market for the different technologies. We also have technical product owners assigned to all of our group functions. So whether that's claims or people or marketing or underwriting, who are staying on the ground of what are the different technologies in that space and then working collectively. So we have quarterly blueprint sessions where we all come together and say, what's going on in your world? What are the new technologies? Are there any proofs of concepts that would make sense for us to prioritize and invest in? And if it fails, it fails. But if it meets some of those strategic objectives. So we're lucky to have lots of different people in the organization that we can bring together to be innovative while also maintaining the BAU, because we've got to keep the lights on and keep our customers happy while we do that.
I think you're very lucky to have that.
Yes,
I've
yeah,
been
we
in
are,
many
yeah.
roles where I haven't had that, and Alison, I suspect you don't. Yeah.
We have a very small R&D, so it's a couple of people, but who kind of take that on that responsibility. But I think for us, it's been actually quantifying some of the roadmap means you can also assess how much capacity you have for innovation and change. And so to stimulate that within Oxfam as well, we run kind of twice yearly something called Tech Camp, which is like hackathon type stuff. So it started to bring a culture of innovation that I think even I was probably underestimated just how much that would unlock. But it's cross-functional, so it's in our retail teams and the technology teams and our fundraising teams. So really focused around revenue, but that kind of thing I think is really great to bring, like as you said, like what's the latest in the market, what are other peers doing, what are we don't call them competitors, but peers and others doing. But also then I think as a leader of technology, you also have a responsibility at a place like conferences like this to find out what others are doing and what's going on and to bring that back to your organisation.
Great, thank you. Did you want to come in on that?
Just one
Andrew?
thing is, so in our world, so we build a lot internally. So yeah, conferences is great. Send your engineers to those big conferences to learn what's happening. We also speak to, of course, our peer set. So again, conferences, but also just using your network. We actually invest in startups as well. So we don't just build everything in-house, we use third-party SaaS solutions. And so sometimes we're using the SaaS solution, sometimes we actually buy into the SaaS company themselves if we think they're good enough. And so that's not necessarily what a lot of people can do, but it's when you might be doing M&A, you might be acquiring other companies, you might be building things. And so it's just trying to find out that information. And then again, not everything that looks great actually is applicable. Again, it comes back to that, is that return on investment there?
No, it's great, and it's a funny world, isn't it? Because the tech is there. It's just, what do you want? What's the point? The so what with your business is so important. Fabulous. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. We'll go here first.
When you think of modernization, digital transformation, monolithic applications with no code, no comments, no documents, play a real blockers actually. So, do you have any specific pattern you follow when you have such dead ends with this kind of thing?
Okay, I'll summarise if I can for the audience. When you've got a tech stack where you've got no documents, no code notes, no nothing, and it's a bit of a dead end. What do you do with that, and how do you address it? How do you modernise it? Is that the right question?
Yeah.
Good. Super. Who would like to answer? Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so that is always a challenge. And so the way we try and think about technology is whenever you start building something new, you really should know how long it's going to last. And so people tend to forget that things have a lifespan. There is an end of life, whether it's 5 years, or it's 10 years, 20 years. You should generally, when you're building new things, always have the idea of how to turn it off eventually. But that doesn't really answer your question, because you've probably got a lot of applications and solutions that are monolithic, that are there, that you've inherited, that don't follow through that. The way we do it is we're pushing through a move to cloud strategy across the whole organization. And that forces people to look at, what do we have? Is it even needed? Because a lot of times there's a lot of applications that you don't really need. They're just maybe duplicative. So when you want to kind of think, okay, what is the core function? What is the business outcome? Is that solution even relevant in this new world? And maybe it's only answering 50% of your problem anyway, because the world's moved on since it was built. So sometimes less about digging into the existing application, more about building the new solution of where you want to be, and then trying to figure out how you turn off the old one as you go through.
Fantastic. I'm being waved at, so we're going to have to wrap up. But these guys will be around all day, so you can put your questions to them individually. So thank you so much to our panel, and thank you for coming along today. And we'll wrap it up there. Cheers.